The next morning, I closed the account he so heavily depended on. That very night, I packed a small bag, carefully placed one plain envelope on our kitchen table, and then, in silence, I walked away. What I chose to leave behind wasn't just money, it was the truth, and I knew it would shatter the life he thought was guaranteed. I'm 57 years old, and until that pivotal moment, I honestly believed I was doing the right thing. My philosophy was simple. If I consistently showed up, paid my share, and often more, remained calm, stayed generous, and was always reasonable, I would eventually earn their respect. Maybe not love, but at least respect. This belief was especially strong as a stepfather in a blended family, where everyone always tells you, give it time, he'll come around. So, when my wife Linda asked if I could help make Ethan's birthday special, I agreed without a second thought. Her son, Ethan, was turning 31. He wasn't a kid or a teenager, but a grown man who had lived in our house on and off for years, typically between jobs or while figuring things out. I never judged him for that. Life can be messy, and I've certainly had my own restarts. But I did expect a basic level of decency. I took the day off work. I made a stop at the bakery near the freeway, the one that opens early and fills the air with the scent of butter and sugar even before the sun is fully up. I ordered the cake I knew Ethan liked. Chocolate with dark ganache. Simple. No decorations, no writing on top. He always hated anything that felt sentimental. As I waited, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Another automatic payment had cleared. Utilities again. I sighed, not angrily, but with a deep weariness, and slipped my phone back into my pocket. The drive home was quiet. The radio played an old song I used to enjoy, and I remember thinking, maybe today will be different. I pulled into the driveway around noon. Ethan's car was already there, newer than mine, by the way. I cut the engine, carefully grabbed the cake box, and walked inside. The house felt oddly tense, not loud, not chaotic, but tight, like a room where an argument had just finished and the air hadn't quite settled. Ethan was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter as if he owned the place, scrolling on his phone. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "I grabbed the cake you like." He barely glanced at the box, then back at his screen. "Cool. No thank you." There was no other acknowledgement. Linda wasn't home yet. She had gone to the salon, saying she needed to clear her head. I didn't think much of it at the time. I carefully set the cake down on the counter and straightened up. "Your mom said you might want to do something low-key this year. Maybe dinner tonight?" That's when he finally looked at me, not annoyed, not distracted, just cold. He tilted his head slightly, almost as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. "Actually," he said, "since you're asking, I've been thinking about my birthday." I nodded. "Yeah?" He smiled, but there was absolutely nothing friendly in it. "The best gift," he said slowly, enunciating each word clearly, "would be you disappearing." For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry?" I asked. He shrugged. "You know, moving out, not being here, that kind of disappearing." I waited. I expected a laugh, a follow-up, anything that would tell me this was sarcasm, frustration, or just a bad joke. Nothing came. My chest felt incredibly tight, like someone had pressed a hand against it and refused to let go. "Why would you say that?" I asked quietly. He scoffed. "Because you're always here, always watching, always paying for things and then acting like it means something." I hadn't said a single word about money that day, or that week. "You're not my dad," he continued. "You never will be. And honestly, everything would be easier if you just weren't around." There it was. that was the line that split something open inside me. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up helping him redo his resume. The mornings I'd driven him to interviews when his car wouldn't start. The health insurance add-on I'd kept paying after he aged out. Just until he gets on his feet. The utilities, the groceries, the rent I never asked for. And this was my role, reduced to a nuisance. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled. A small, polite smile. "Okay," I said. That seemed to surprise him. He frowned slightly, as if he had expected a fight. "I hear you," I added. Then I picked up my keys and walked out. I sat in my car for a long time, long enough for my hands to stop shaking, long enough for the initial shock to transform into something heavier, something clearer. I wasn't angry yet. I was simply awake. That night, after Linda came home and completely avoided the conversation, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I replayed his words over and over. "You're not my dad. Everything would be easier if you weren't around." And somewhere between midnight and dawn, a realization hit me that changed everything. I had spent years trying to earn a place in a house where my mere presence was tolerated, but my financial support was absolutely expected. The very next morning, I made a decision. If he wanted me to disappear, I would disappear from precisely the places that mattered most. I woke up before my alarm, the way you do when something deep inside you has already decided there's no more pretending. The house was quiet, too quiet. Linda was still asleep, turned away from me, her phone glowing faintly on the nightstand, as if it had never truly stopped working. I slipped out of bed, being careful not to make a sound, and went straight to the kitchen. The same kitchen where Ethan had told me I should disappear. The same counter where I'd set down his birthday cake, like an offering. I poured myself a cup of coffee and didn't sit down. I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. So I opened my laptop. At first, I told myself I was just checking one thing, one number, one account. But that's never how it goes, is it? You open one statement, then another. You click a folder you haven't looked at in years because you didn't want to feel petty or resentful or small. The folder was labeled simply House. Inside were subfolders I recognized immediately. Utilities, insurance, auto, tuition, medical, miscellaneous. I hadn't opened them in a long time because I didn't need to. I knew what was there, or at least I thought I did. I started with the joint checking account. The balance wasn't enormous, but it was steady because I made sure it stayed that way. Every month, without fail, my paycheck dropped in, covering the mortgage, electric, water, internet, trash, and streaming services. Ethan used more than anyone. Gas, groceries, all the quiet, unglamorous expenses that make a life function. I scrolled back. 1 year, 2 years, 3. The numbers stacked up faster than I expected. Not because they were shocking, but because they were consistent, predictable, relentless. I opened the insurance folder next. When Ethan turned 26 and lost coverage through his biological father's plan, it had been temporary. That was the word Linda used. Just until he found a job with benefits. Just until he got settled. That was 5 years ago. Dental, vision, health, every single month, automatically drafted from my account. I remembered the conversation clearly. Ethan, sitting at this very table, arms crossed, saying, "I didn't ask you to do that." And me replying, "I know, but I don't want you uninsured." At the time, that felt like being a decent human being. Now, It felt like evidence. The auto folder made my jaw tighten. Repairs, tires, registration, insurance deductibles, the down payment on the car. He liked because it felt more adult, the one he insisted he'd cover once he was back on his feet. Back on his feet had apparently become a permanent condition that never arrived. Then there was tuition. Community college classes dropped. Programs restarted. Certification exams that were never taken. Online courses abandoned halfway through. Each one accompanied by an apology. Each one followed by another request. And me, every single time, saying some version of, "It's okay, just keep trying." By the time I closed the folder, my coffee had gone completely cold. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry yet. What I felt was something worse. Used. Behind me, the hallway creaked softly. Linda appeared in the doorway, her robe pulled tight around her, hair messy, eyes already tired. "You're up early," she said. I nodded, not looking at her. "Couldn't sleep." She walked over, glanced at my open laptop screen, and frowned. "Are you going through accounts?" I finally looked at her then. "Do you remember what Ethan said yesterday?" I asked. She hesitated. That pause told me everything I needed to know. "He didn't mean it like that," she said carefully. "He was upset." "He told me the best gift would be me disappearing," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. "Did he apologize?" She sighed. "You know how he is. He doesn't always express himself well." I gestured toward the screen. "Do you know how much of this comes from me?" Her eyes flicked down, then quickly away. "You're the one who always insists on helping," she said. "No one forced you." That landed harder than Ethan's words. I closed the laptop slowly. "I didn't insist," I replied. "I stepped in when you asked me to, when he needed it, when you both said it was temporary." She crossed her arms. "So what? You're keeping score now?" "No," I replied. "I'm waking up." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then at me. "I don't want to fight this morning." Neither did I. I picked up my keys. "I have an appointment," I said. "With who?" "The bank." Her eyes widened just slightly. "Why?" I met her gaze and didn't blink. "Because if I'm going to disappear, I need to know exactly where I exist." I left before she could answer. The bank was only 15 minutes away, but the drive felt much longer. Every red light gave my thoughts time to spiral, not into rage, but into realization. I wasn't the villain in the story. I was the safety net everyone assumed would never move. Inside the bank, the air smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and coffee. The same manager greeted me with the same polite smile. He knew my name. He'd known it for years. "What can I help you with today?" he asked. I took a breath. "I want to review all my accounts," I said, "and I want to know exactly who depends on them." He nodded, already typing. As the screen reflected in his glasses, I saw his expression change just slightly. "Sir," he said carefully, "you are the primary contributor on several accounts." I nodded. "I know there are also automatic payments tied to them. If these are closed or altered, it may cause disruptions." I finished the sentence for him. He looked up. "Yes." I smiled then, not happily, but with clear certainty. "Good," I said. When I left the bank an hour later, I wasn't lighter, but I was absolutely certain. That afternoon, I went back home while no one else was there. I sat at the kitchen table, printed out a small stack of documents, slid them into a plain envelope, and wrote one sentence on the front. "You asked me to disappear, This is what that looks like. I placed it right where the cake had been. Then I packed a bag. I didn't know yet where I was going, but I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. I didn't go back to the house that night.
I checked into a modest hotel off the highway, the kind with beige walls, quiet hallways, and a front desk clerk who didn't ask questions. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, and stared at the envelope I'd left behind in my mind, as if it were still in my hands. I wondered how long it would take before someone opened it, before the words landed, before the panic started. Sleep came in short, broken stretches. Every time my phone buzzed, I ignored it.
I needed one full day of doing things the right way, not the emotional way. By 8:30 the next morning, I was back at the bank. This time, I asked to see a private office. The manager, Mark, recognized me immediately. He was in his mid-40s, neat haircut, calm voice, the kind of man who had delivered both good news and bad news for years without letting either show too much on his face. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "How can I help today?" I didn't ease into it. "I want to close the joint checking account," I said, "and I want to separate all automatic payments tied to my name." He paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. "May I ask why?" "You may," I replied, "and I'll answer, but it won't change the decision." He nodded once and began typing. "As you know, this account has multiple authorized users." "I know exactly who has access," I said, "and I want that access revoked." Mark leaned back slightly, studying the screen. "Sir, you are the primary contributor. Most deposits come from your income. However, closing the account will affect other parties. Bills may go unpaid. Cards may decline." "I understand," I said. "That's the point." His eyes flicked up just for a second. "There are also linked services," he continued. "Insurance payments, utility auto drafts, subscriptions. Some of these are in other names, but funded here." "I want them stopped," I said, "or rerouted to accounts not under my control." He exhaled quietly. "This is significant." "So was being told to disappear," I said evenly. That did it. Mark's expression changed. Not dramatically, not visibly to anyone else walking past the glass office, but enough that I could tell he was no longer just processing a routine request. "Let's go through this carefully," he said. "For the next 40 minutes, we reviewed everything. Every line item, every dependency, every quiet assumption built into the financial structure of my household." As Mark explained the implications, I listened closely. I wasn't being reckless. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was reclaiming responsibility for what was mine and releasing responsibility for what never should have been. "I'll need your signature here," he said, sliding a form across the desk. "And here." I signed with a steady hand. "And this," he added, placing another page on top. "This revokes authorized access to your accounts effective immediately." I signed again. When it was all done, Mark looked at me and said something unexpected. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you're doing this the right way." I gave a small nod. "That matters to me." As I stood to leave, he hesitated. "One more thing. There was a pending transaction scheduled for tomorrow." My stomach tightened. "What kind?" "A deposit tied to a lease application," he said. "It appears someone attempted to use this account as proof of funds." I felt a flash of something sharp and cold. "Was it approved?" I asked. "No," he said, "because the account is now closed." I thanked him and walked out. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. This time, I looked. 3 missed calls from Linda,
2 from Ethan, 1 voicemail. I didn't listen yet. Instead, I drove straight to my attorney's office. I hadn't planned to involve a lawyer, but after the revelation about the lease, I realized something else had been happening behind my back, something that could get ugly if I didn't protect myself. My attorney, Carol, had helped me with a will update years earlier. She greeted me warmly, but her smile faded as I explained the situation. "Have there been any threats?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I expect there will be." She nodded. "It's good you came now."
We talked about boundaries, about financial separation, about what I owed and what I didn't. You are not legally responsible for an adult stepchild unless you've signed specific documents, she said. Generosity does not create obligation. I let that sink in. Before I left, she handed me a single-page document. "This is a formal notice," she said. "It outlines a separation of finances and sets clear expectations. You don't have to use it, but if things escalate, it helps to have a paper trail." I folded it carefully and placed it in my jacket pocket. When I finally listened to the voicemail in my car, Ethan's voice was different. Not sharp, not smug. Panicked. "What did you do?" he demanded. "My card got declined. The bank says the account is gone. You can't just... This isn't funny." I deleted the message. That afternoon, I returned to the house one last time. The front door was unlocked. The living room looked exactly the same, as if nothing had shifted yet, even though everything had. The envelope was gone. In its place, the cake box sat untouched, shoved to the side of the counter. I took one final look around. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I put myself first. As I closed the door behind me, my phone buzzed again. This time with a single text from Ethan. "Call me. We need to talk." I didn't respond. Not yet. Because for the first time, the silence belonged entirely to me. I didn't answer the calls. Not that night. Not the next morning. I let the phone sit face down on the small desk in my hotel room, vibrating itself into stillness every few minutes. Each buzz felt like a tug on an old rope, one I had spent years holding tight so everyone else wouldn't fall. Letting go didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet, almost surgical. By the time I returned to the house the following afternoon, I knew exactly what I was there to do. Linda's car was gone, Ethan's too. The driveway was empty, the way it used to be when I first moved in, before everything became crowded with expectations. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of the cake I'd brought the day before, chocolate and sugar still sealed in its box, still waiting to be celebrated by someone who hadn't even noticed it was there. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock on the wall. It struck me how often I'd stood in this exact spot, holding something for someone else. I set my overnight bag down and opened the drawer where we kept pens and envelopes. I didn't write much. I didn't need to. Just a few lines, clear and legible. "You asked me to disappear. I'm respecting that. Everything in this envelope is factual. Nothing here is meant to hurt you, only to be honest." I slid the letter back into the envelope along with the documents I'd printed the night before. Bank statements, account closure confirmations, notices of canceled automatic payments. A simple summary page listing what I would no longer be covering effective immediately. No insults, no lectures, just facts. I placed the envelope in the center of the kitchen table, weighed it down with my car keys for a moment, then thought better of it and removed them. I didn't want it to look theatrical. I wanted it to look final. Upstairs, I packed quietly. I didn't take much. Clothes, toiletries, a few personal items. The things that were undeniably mine.
I left behind everything else. The furniture I'd helped pick out, the TV I'd mounted myself, the kitchen gadgets I'd paid for, because you're better with that stuff. It wasn't an act of generosity. It was an act of detachment. As I zipped the bag closed, my phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Ethan, what's going on?" I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I didn't reply. Downstairs, I paused at the kitchen table one last time. I imagined Ethan walking in, seeing the envelope, tearing it open with that familiar impatience. I imagined the moment his confusion turned into understanding. The moment when the safety net finally snapped. I walked out without locking the door. That evening, I checked into a different hotel, farther away, somewhere no one would think to look. I ordered room service, ate slowly, and let the quiet settle into my bones. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. At 8:47 p.m., the call started again. Linda first, then Ethan, then Linda again. I didn't answer. At 9:12, a text came through from Linda. "Linda, you're being dramatic. Come home and we'll talk." I read it once, then again. I set the phone down. At 9:26, Ethan called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was different now. "Hey, look, I don't know what you think you're doing, but my card isn't working. The bank says there's nothing they can do. This isn't okay. You need to fix this." Fix this. That phrase echoed in my head long after the message ended. At 10:03, another text from Ethan. "Ethan, my birthday plans are falling apart. You seriously need to call me." I actually laughed then. Not out loud, just a quiet, disbelieving exhale. So that was the emergency. The next morning, I woke to a missed call from an unfamiliar number. Then another, then a voicemail marked urgent. I listened. "This is Melissa from Oak Ridge Leasing. We're calling regarding the account verification you provided for your application. Unfortunately, the funds we were shown are no longer available. Please contact us as soon as possible." I closed my eyes. So, that was it. The thing he hadn't mentioned. The reason the account had been used without my knowledge. The reason the closure hit harder than he'd expected. I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney without comment. By noon, Linda showed up at the hotel. I hadn't told her where I was staying, but I'd underestimated how quickly panic sharpens focus. She knocked on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. When I opened it, her face was flushed, eyes bright with anger and something close to fear. "What are you doing?" she demanded, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Do you have any idea what you've caused?" I closed the door behind her calmly. "Yes, you humiliated him," she said. "You humiliated us." I gestured toward the chair. "Sit down." She didn't. "He's your stepson," she continued. "You don't just pull the rug out from under him like this." I met her gaze. "He told me to disappear." "That was one comment," she snapped. "You're overreacting." I took a breath. That one comment came after years of support you never acknowledged and he openly resented. She crossed her arms. "So what? You're punishing him?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm stepping out of a role I was never respected in." She stared at me, searching my face for something. Guilt, doubt, weakness. She didn't find it. "What about me?" she asked finally. "What about our marriage?" I thought of all the times she'd stayed silent when he disrespected me. All the times she'd said, "Just let it go." "This is about me," I said for once. She left without another word.
That evening, Ethan sent one final message. "Ethan, you left paperwork on the table. What is this supposed to mean?" I typed back one sentence. "It means I listened." Then I turned off my phone. For the first time since he'd spoken those words, I felt something settle in my chest. Relief. Because walking away in silence wasn't weakness. It was the loudest boundary I'd ever set. The silence didn't last. It never does when people realize the ground beneath them wasn't solid. It was borrowed.
I turned my phone back on 2 days later, not because I missed anyone, but because I wanted a record. Caro had been clear about that. If things escalate, document everything. So I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, coffee cooling in my hands, and watched the screen light up like a slot machine that wouldn't stop spinning. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacked on top of texts. Linda's name filled most of them. Ethan's appeared more frequently as the hours passed. The tone shifted fast. The first messages had been irritated, almost annoyed, like I'd inconvenienced them. Then confused, then anxious, then desperate. I listened to the voicemails in order. "Where are you?" Linda asked in the first one. Her voice was tight, controlled. This isn't how adults handle conflict. The next was from Ethan. "Okay, this isn't funny anymore," he said. "My card still isn't working, and I've got things scheduled. You need to fix this." Then another, later that night. "Mom's freaking out. The utilities notice came in. The internet's about to shut off. Did you seriously cancel everything?" By the fourth voicemail, his voice had lost its edge. "Look, I didn't mean what I said. You know that, right? I was just mad. You always take things personally." I paused the message and stared at the wall. Always take things personally. I remembered swallowing comments like that for years. Remembered being told I was too sensitive whenever I asked for basic respect. Remembered convincing myself that being patient was the same as being valued. I let the voicemail finish. "Just call me back," Ethan said, quieter now. "We'll figure something out." Figure something out. That had always been my role. Later that afternoon, Linda texted, "Linda, you've made your point. This has gone far enough." I didn't respond. An hour later, another message. "Linda, Ethan's lease fell through. He was counting on moving out. Now everything's a mess." There it was. The thing the bank manager had hinted at. The thing Ethan hadn't mentioned when he told me to disappear. He hadn't just been planning a birthday. He'd been planning an exit. One built on funds he didn't actually have. And when that plan collapsed, so did the illusion that I was optional. That evening, there was a knock at my hotel room door. I hadn't ordered anything. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I looked through the people. Ethan. He looked smaller than I remembered. Shoulders slumped, hair unkempt. That familiar confidence replaced with something fragile and frantic. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "We need to talk," he said, breathless. "I'm listening," I replied. He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. "Can I come in?" I shook my head. "We can talk right here." He swallowed. "Okay, fine." He shifted his weight, rubbing his hands together. "I didn't know you were going to do all this." "You told me to disappear," I said evenly. "I didn't mean like this." He snapped, then caught himself. "I mean, look, things are complicated right now." "They always are," I said. He sighed heavily. "I was just trying to get on my feet. The apartment was supposed to be my fresh start, and now it's gone." "Because the account was closed," I said. "Yes," he admitted, "because of that." And why was that account listed on your application? I asked. He looked away. Ethan, I said, why? His jaw tightened. Because they needed proof of funds. And you didn't have them. I was going to, he insisted. I just needed time. Time? Another word I'd given freely, without limit. You use my stability to prove your independence, I said quietly. He looked back at me, his eyes sharp with frustration. You make it sound like I did something wrong. You did, I replied. You treated my support like it was owed to you. He scoffed. You chose to help. Yes, I said.
And you chose to tell me my absence would be a gift.
We stood there in silence. Finally, he spoke again. So what now? I thought about that question for a long moment. What do you want from me? I asked instead. He hesitated. I just need a little help, just until I get settled. There it was. Not an apology, not accountability, just another request. No, I said. The word came out calm, steady, final. His eyes widened. You can't just abandon us. I didn't abandon anyone, I said. I stepped back from a role I was never respected in. He laughed bitterly. So, you're really going to do this over one stupid comment? I leaned closer, lowering my voice. It wasn't one comment. It was the truth, finally said out loud. His phone buzzed. He checked it, his face draining of color. What is it? I asked. The power company, he muttered. They're saying the payment didn't go through. I nodded. That's correct. You didn't have to cancel everything, he said angrily. You're trying to teach me a lesson. No, I replied. Life is. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You really don't care, he said. I met his gaze. I care enough to stop enabling you. He shook his head slowly. Mom was right. You're cold. I almost smiled, because for the first time, cold meant clear. Take care of yourself, Ethan, I said. I closed the door gently. Later that night, Linda called again. This time, I answered. Her voice cracked as soon as she spoke. He's falling apart. I'm not his foundation, I said softly. You made sure of that. There was a long pause. Are you coming back? She asked. I thought of the envelope, the table, the cake untouched. I don't know, I said honestly, but things can't go back to how they were. She didn't argue. When the call ended, I sat alone in the quiet room and realized something important. They didn't miss me. They missed what I made possible. And once that was gone, they finally understood what disappearing really meant. I thought the worst part would be the begging. I was wrong. The worst part came 3 days later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, when I was halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee and a sharp, authoritative, unmistakable knock hit my hotel room door. I froze. No one had texted. No one had called. No warning. I set the mug down slowly and walked to the door. Before opening it, I checked the people. 2 uniformed police officers stood in the hallway. My heart didn't race the way you might expect. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. The kind that comes when something you feared finally arrives. I opened the door. Sir, the taller officer asked, his tone neutral, hand resting near his belt. Are you Ethan Miller's stepfather? Yes, I said. I'm fine if that's why you're here. They exchanged a glance. We received a welfare check request, the second officer said.
A report that you may be experiencing emotional distress and financial instability.
There it was. The line had been crossed. I'm not in distress, I said evenly.
and I'm financially stable. May we come in? The taller one asked. I stepped aside. Of course. They entered, glanced around the room, noted the neatly made bed, the open laptop on the desk, the stack of documents beside it. Nothing chaotic, nothing alarming. Who requested the welfare check? I asked. The officer hesitated.
Your stepson and your wife confirmed concerns. I nodded slowly. So, I said, they told you I was unstable because I stopped paying their bills. The second officer raised an eyebrow. That's not how it was phrased. Of course not, I replied. They asked routine questions. Was I sleeping, eating, working? Did I feel a danger to myself or others? I answered calmly, clearly, honestly. After 10 minutes, the taller officer closed his notebook. Sir, he said, you appear to be fine. We don't see any cause for concern. Thank you, I said. As they turned to leave, I added, I'd like this documented. He nodded. It will be. When the door closed behind them, I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space they'd left. I felt violated. Not scared, but violated. Because this wasn't concern. This was retaliation. I called Carol immediately. They filed a welfare check, I said. Claimed I was unstable. She exhaled sharply. I was afraid of that. So what now? I asked. Now we protect you, she said, and we document everything. Within an hour, she had drafted a formal response, a cease and desist. Clear language, no threats, just facts. False reports, harassment, boundaries. This doesn't mean you're escalating, she told me over the phone. It means you're refusing to be cornered. That afternoon, Linda texted. Linda, why did you involve the police? I stared at the message in disbelief. I typed back slowly. I didn't.
You did? The reply came seconds later. Linda, we were worried. You disappeared. Ethan was scared.
Scared? I thought of the envelope, the receipts, the letter. I called her. This ends now, I said as soon as she answered. You don't get to question my sanity because I stopped funding your son's lifestyle. You're twisting this, she said, her voice shaking. He thought you might hurt yourself. No, I said firmly. He thought I might take away his safety net, and he was right. She went silent. You crossed a line, I continued, and if it happens again, it won't just be a letter. What does that mean? She asked. It means attorneys, documentation, consequences. Her voice dropped. So, you're threatening us now? No, I said. I'm protecting myself. That night, Ethan sent a message I'd never expected. Ethan, I didn't think they'd actually send cops. I read it twice, then a third time. Finally, I replied, You told them I was unstable. A pause. Then, Ethan, I was desperate. I closed my eyes. Desperate enough to paint me as dangerous? Desperate enough to strip me of dignity. I typed back one final message. Desperation doesn't excuse dishonesty. After that, I blocked his number. Not forever, but for now. The next day, Carol forwarded me an email. The leasing office had officially rejected Ethan's application. The power company had issued a final notice. The internet was shut off. Reality had arrived, and this time, it didn't knock politely. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. I felt tired, but not broken, because something had shifted deep inside me.
They tried to make me the villain. They tried to make me look unstable, cruel, heartless. But the truth was simple. I had stopped paying for disrespect, and when that happened, they showed exactly how far they were willing to go to get it back. Tomorrow, I would decide what came next. But tonight, I slept deeply. For the first time in years, no one was standing on my chest, demanding I breathe for them. The morning after the welfare check, I woke up before sunrise. Not from anxiety, not from anger, but from stillness. The kind of quiet you don't notice when your life is full of other people's emergencies. The kind that settles in when there's nothing left to brace for.
I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing, and realized something simple but profound. No one was coming for me anymore. I got up, showered, and dressed without rushing. For the first time in a long while, the day belonged to me before it belonged to anyone else. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from Linda. I stared at her name longer than I needed to. Then I opened it. Linda, Ethan read everything you left, all the paperwork.
He hasn't said much since. I imagined him at the kitchen table, the same place he told me to disappear, the same place where he'd finally been forced to sit with numbers instead of assumptions, with facts instead of entitlement. I didn't respond right away. A few minutes later, another message came through. Linda, he didn't realize how much you were covering. He thought it was shared. Shared. That word had carried a lot of weight in our marriage. It was the word used to blur lines, to soften responsibility, to avoid hard conversations. I typed back carefully. Shared requires respect and acknowledgement. There was a long pause. Then my phone rang. Linda again. I answered. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not defensive, not sharp, just tired. He's scared, she said. Not about money, about failing. I closed my eyes. Fear doesn't excuse cruelty. I know, she whispered. I see that now. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that used to make me incredibly uncomfortable. Now it felt honest. He said he didn't think you'd actually leave, she continued. He thought you'd cool off, like always. I swallowed. That's the problem, I said. I always did. She didn't argue. What happens now? She asked. I took a breath. Now things are different. I explained my boundaries slowly, clearly. No joint accounts, no automatic payments, no financial involvement with Ethan going forward. Not as punishment, but as a reset. If there's going to be any relationship, I said, it has to be built on mutual respect, not dependency. Linda cried quietly on the other end of the line. I should have protected you, she said. I didn't, and I'm sorry. That apology mattered more than she knew. I'm not asking you to choose, I told her. I'm asking you to see. I do, she said. Later that afternoon, Ethan emailed me. Not texted, not called, emailed. The subject line was simple. I read it. The message was short. He didn't apologize outright. Not yet. But for the first time, he didn't accuse me either. He wrote that he hadn't understood how much I'd been doing behind the scenes, that he'd never thought about what would happen if it stopped, that he'd been angry not at me, but at himself, and had taken it out on the easiest target. He ended with one sentence. I didn't think disappearing would mean this. I replied once. It means facing life without a cushion you didn't earn. That was all. I didn't block him again. I didn't re-engage either. I let the space do what space is meant to do.
In the weeks that followed, my life slowly reshaped itself. I moved into a small apartment closer to work. Nothing fancy, but clean, quiet, and mine.
I set up my own routines. Morning walks, cooking meals I actually enjoyed, calling friends I hadn't spoken to in years because I'd been too busy managing someone else's chaos. My finances stabilized in ways they hadn't before. Not because I had more money, but because I had fewer drains. And the strangest thing happened. I felt lighter. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. Linda and I started counseling, slowly, carefully, on neutral ground. Ethan got a second job, then a third.
His birthday came and went quietly. No party, no cake, no illusion, just reality. Months later, Linda asked me a question I'll never forget. If you could go back, she said, would you do it differently? I thought about the envelope on the table, the paperwork, the silence. No, I said. I would do it sooner. Because what I left on that table wasn't revenge. It was clarity. And clarity changes everything.
If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible, used, or taken for granted by the people closest to you, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell me where you're watching from. We share stories like this every day. Stories about boundaries, dignity, and finding your way back to yourself. So, if you don't want to miss the next one, subscribe and stay with us. Let's keep going together.